I also can. There we go. It works. Yay. Awesome. If you guys can hear me, give me a thumbs up or type a comment. Let me know. You can give me a thumbs up. I won't see it. Just type a comment and let me know. Because the first time I'm kind of doing this setup when I have an external camera. Let's see if it works. If not, then I'll just end up talking to myself. Thanks for joining. I try to do this every month, but I had a massive gap. It kind of fell off the radar around the peak of COVID, and I never started it. So I apologize for that. Better late than never. I'll try to maintain it every month. What I do is some of the questions I get that I can't really answer quickly on social media, or the questions that I get over and over and over again, I sometimes collect them so I can answer them in this format. And also allows you to add comments, right below, either on YouTube or Facebook. On my Facebook page, I'm not sure if it works if you put the comment to Milton Talk or not. We'll find out. But definitely do not put a comment on, don't send me a Facebook message. And that has happened in the past where someone sends me a message and gets upset that I didn't take the question. I'm not looking at Facebook messages. If in general, just don't send me Facebook messages. I don't look at them. If you have a real political issue or real municipal issue, send me an email. That's a lot better than Facebook messages. Anyways, I'm going to look at the screen, see if there are questions coming through. And if they're not, then I have some questions from the past that I can start taking. Alrighty. Let's see. Now, that's weird. So there seems to be a bit of a lag on YouTube and a lot bigger lag on Facebook. So your questions might take some time to get to me, because I just noticed that YouTube's about a couple of minutes behind. It's not as live, and Facebook's good 5 minutes behind. It's Facebook. What are you going to do about it? So technically, Facebook hasn't even started yet. It's still doing the intro sequence. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with the questions that I had received before, and we'll go from there. Question: how do we control high-rises coming everywhere? Actually, you know what? If that's okay with you, I'll take this question towards the end, because I'll talk about some of the other stuff that'll answer parts of the questions, parts of this question, and then I'll come back to it. Let me take a different question first. With recent CN project approval, how do you think it will affect the lives of people living in Milton? I'm actually still not on the camp that believes that CN is happening in Milton. If you go back in time, if you recall, CN first talked about it in late 2014 or early 2015. I'm mixing my time, but definitely at that time. They talked about construction starting in 2015, and they talked about the intermodal being fully operational in 2016. By 2016. It's 2021 and construction hasn't started yet, and that's because of people like yourselves and the town of Milton, region of Halton, province of Ontario as well gets the credit because they're with us on this fight. We've been able to hold them off. I think the next step would be, probably to take CN to court and let the courts decide, because we do feel that we have a valid argument. I won't go into details of what they are, because if it goes before courts, then I don't want to give, we don't want to show our hands to CN. But I wouldn't count on anything happening anytime soon. Once something's before the courts, it's easily 2 to 3 year process. So let the courts figure things out. We have good representation. We have good arguments, and we think we have a point. So let's see. Take the next question. That question's done. I'm going to delete that. When is the Arts Center? I know who asked that question. So the Arts Center had to close, unfortunately, because we're using that as a vaccination clinic. there were a number of periods where we thought about kind of moving stuff out and reopening it, but then every time we started having the discussion, the COVID numbers started to get bad again. So we're like, you know what, let's not mess with COVID things. Uh, believe that the region of Halton is moving the vaccination clinic out of the Arts Center later this year. So, in a couple of weeks. And then our staff will start looking at how to phase in the opening and how to start programming again. I don't think COVID numbers are going to get worse. Fingers crossed. With our vaccination rates are fairly high in the province of Ontario, so I don't think we have to. I don't think we'll go back to the first three waves and what we saw then. So fingers crossed. Hopefully, you'll see in the next couple of months the Arts Center opening up and coming back. I know that you're a lot of people looking forward to it. My wife and I, we probably attended 5-6 shows a year, so not as frequent as some of you guys, but still not so infrequently. We did use the Art Center quite a bit, and so we're looking forward to it as well. Hopefully soon. Like that. How do we? I know. I said I'll come back to this later. Where can I get the booster shot? You know what? If you go to halton.ca/COVID-19, that's the best place to get answers to all these questions because information is changing quite rapidly. I know my dad got his first booster shot or his third shot today, about an hour ago. So yay, Dad! And I don't want to be giving out information on somebody else. I almost mentioned somebody else. My dad saw getting the shot, so I won't say it because it's their private information. They can decide whether they want to disclose it or not. But go to halton.ca/COVID-19. That's where you'll get the information. Fair enough. Move on to the next one. Is Milton hiring more full-time firefighters to keep up with the population growth? It has been a challenge because fire department is quite expensive. Firefighters are not inexpensive. We are at the proposed budget. So if you watch the council meeting on Monday, that's the budget meeting. I'll be going to the budget process, and we're proposing 5 new firefighters for 2022. In fact, we might be able to hire them a lot sooner. So as opposed to hiring them around April, May timeframe, we might be able to get them in January. So do watch out. It is happening. It's coming. This cup, by the way, was a gift. So if you're watching this, thank you. It's been almost a year. Still going strong. It's like magic. Let's see. During the last election, you said Milton very high infrastructure deficit. How are we doing on this now? Actually, you know what? I see 2 questions that are pretty closely related. So let's take a moment to talk about taxes, and then we can come back on the growth stuff. I don't really see any questions coming in from Facebook or whatever. It's hard to know. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Come on, where are you? You're right there. I shared that on Facebook, I believe, or Twitter, somewhere in social media yesterday, and it started an interesting debate. The people who looked at it and said, "Oh my God, that's awesome! Milton's doing a great job. Our taxes are low. Keep it that way." And there were people like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you? Why are taxes so much lower than everyone else? We need the services. We need better services, and so on." So, regardless of where you stand in that discussion, the fact does remain that Milton is significantly lower when it comes to the taxes we raise from the public and when it comes to taxes that you pay, compared to anyone else in Ontario. People do use the city of Toronto as an example sometimes. Toronto is not a good example because they do have a lower tax rate, but the property values are much higher. And Toronto also has access to other forms of taxation that other municipalities don't have. So whereas other municipalities almost exclusively rely on user fees and property taxes, City of Toronto can do licensing fee and car registration tax and land transfer tax and whole host of other things. They also get extra funding from upper levels of government that we don't have access to. So let's leave the City of Toronto out. But if you look at the chart that I'm sharing, you'll notice that Milton, just look at people living in Burlington, Oakville, Brampton, Mississauga, they're all significantly higher. I mean, an average house is paying over about $100 a month more. It doesn't mean that we're increasing our taxes. I've been sharing this for 12 years, and every year someone comes out and says, "Oh, that means that you just use this as an excuse to jack up Milton's taxes." And the gap has actually gone up in past 12 years. So we must be doing something right. There was one more question that I wanted to take. Oh, infrastructure deficit, right? That's something that Councillor Di Lorenzo and I and others have talked about for many, many years. What we did a few years ago, I believe it was the first. I share that budget. I think it was a 2018 or 2019. I believe it was a 2018, 2019 budget where we started taking, or maybe it was a couple of years before that. My years, I'm mixing up my years, but we took $1 million and started putting aside every year for our infrastructure deficit. Infrastructure deficit, let me talk about that for a bit. So think of all the infrastructure that we're building up, all the new roads and new community centers and new parks and everything else that's going up. Milton has a hyper growth, so things are happening in a very compressed period of time. All of that will need renewal and maintenance, right? So 20 years from now, suddenly we get this bill where we have to repave all the roads, we have to redo the parks, where we have to kind of maintain the buildings or change the roofing and whatever. And so we'll have to come up with a whole lot of money at that time, and we'll be in a world of pain. City of Mississauga is dealing with that right now because they apparently didn't put as much money aside. And so we had staff look at infrastructure deficit and try to figure out how much we should be putting aside every year. So if you look at the black line in here, that kind of shows you our target. And you can see, I mean, if you go back in time 4 or 5 years ago, the gap was massive. We were basically putting almost nothing aside. But you can see that the gap is closing up every year. And that's really because we started taking some of the tax money and putting it aside. There are always people who come out and say, why do you take my money today from my taxes to lower taxes 10 years from now? I don't know where I'm going to be. And the answer is because we're fiscally responsible. It's a fiscally responsible thing to do. Since I'm here, I'll show you this chart around our reserve balance as well, because that always comes up. People are always, talking about how we take money from reserves and yada, yada, yada. Where you see in the projected 10-year plan, the reserves going down is when we take on a major project. So we have, at least this year's budget, the proposed capital budget, we have 129 different capital projects going on. And sometimes they have larger projects, a massive library or a big community center that comes up that has a major bill. And so instead of having that bill 1 year, we keep putting money aside every year until we can take on that project, and you'll see our reserve drop down and rise back up again. The alternative would be to borrow money into that project and then pay it off over time. We try not to borrow money, although there is a chart on Venture in here that you can look at as well. Yeah, we do borrow money when it's appropriate. So you can see that in this chart, you'll see that there are some debt that we take on, but we stay well under the debt limit and well below where it can become painful. But we generally prefer not to debt finance project in hopes that people will come up and use them in the future, because that can backfire quite badly. All right, now I'm confused because I am not sure if it's working on Facebook. I do see people watching it, so that's a good thing, but I don't see questions showing up in the tool. I use something called StreamYard. I don't see your questions popping up in StreamYard. So if you're typing up questions, and I just dropped a bunch of tea, it burns. If you're typing up questions and I'm not seeing them, let me just peek into YouTube or Facebook to see if I can actually see your questions, because I can't see them. Let me test if this comes through. Sometimes you debug things live. Oh, yes, it is working. Awesome, family. Hey, you're always there, man. I like your participation. Okay, so let me just go back and take the other question that I put off before, and that was about how do we control high-rises coming everywhere. High-rise is actually technically not coming everywhere. There are certain areas where there's pressure to intensify. The pressure is from the province, the pressure is from the region, the pressure is also from members of the public, not just the development community, but it's also from the development community. Members of public, meaning both from new buyers that are priced out of the market and they want more smaller condos to kind of start the journey into the housing market, but also for people who believe, rightfully or wrongfully, I mean, no judgment, but who believe that the only way to grow is to grow up so we can preserve as much land as possible. And we've had delegations in Milton Council by many people who say there should be no single family homes built, period, because they're not sustainable. And the only way we should grow is condos. So we have, the bottom line is we have pressure coming in from every which end. The main area where we get pressure to intensify is major nodes. So when you see, let's say Ontario Street and Dairy Road, the 6-lane, future 6-lane highway, where it's 4-lane Dairy Road right now, it's going to be 6-lane, and a 5-lane road. Like that major intersection is where you get some pressure to put some condos in, or you get it around downtown Milton, because there's, especially from downtown businesses, there's a lot of demand to get more people living there, so they have more foot traffic. I mean, if you've lived in Milton for more than a few months, you'll notice downtown Milton is almost a revolving door of businesses shutting down. Like people pour their heart and life savings into starting a business, and it doesn't survive because there's just not a lot of foot traffic there. So we have major demand there. And then we have demand in the GO station, like around the Milton GO station area. Now, what I want to do, and fortunately, Milton Council has the same plan, and Regional of Halton has almost endorsed the same plan. So yay, I think we're on the path. But let me share my screen one more time. All right, so you can see my screen. Our GO station is right here, where you see the Real Canadian Superstore. This area will be intensified quite significantly over the next 15, 20 years. Probably 20 years, but it's already started now. There's already a lot of 20 to 30-ish, 34, 35-story condos coming up in this area. And what's going to happen, I can't move mouse. What's going to happen is that we're going to have to redo Nipissing Road, because existing Nipissing Ring Road cannot really carry that traffic, nor does it look very urban. So we'll have to urbanize Nipissing Road, turn it into a very, pedestrian-friendly, high-density neighborhood. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. But that's one major note. Now, what I want to do, and it was my plan during the last campaign, but what Milton staff wants to do the same thing, Milton Council wants to do the same thing, and Region of Halton is on board as well. So yay, seems like everyone wants to do the same thing. If you follow the CN track right here, it passes through Trafalgar between 401 and Dairy, and the plan is to bring up a second GO station right here, because that means that everyone doesn't have to drive downtown or drive to the same area to take GO. They can now spread out traffic. The plan is to work with the federal government, and hopefully the provincial government will come on board to start all-day transit and two-way services in Milton as well. And once we do that, once we have this GO station, I should mention that Metrolinx has approved our master plan in principle for a second GO station here, and developers in this area have agreed to fund that GO station as long as there's, they can do development here. So it's a win-win situation where private sector is paying for it and we all benefit from it. But then the idea is that it's a blank slate, and we put high density along the Trafalgar corridor. If you are interested in reading up more about it, we call it our Egerton secondary plan, is up here. It's more industrial. And Trafalgar secondary plan, which is along Trafalgar Road. Oakville is, you also see some construction of Trafalgar Road in Oakville North. It's close to Mississauga, and there's a lot of demand for high density in this area close to Mississauga. In fact, most people don't want to come all the way to Milton to get high density. They want to stay as close to Mississauga as possible. So imagine a high density neighborhood with 19,000 jobs, 30,000 people living in a very, very compact, pedestrian-friendly, cycling-friendly neighborhood served by the GO station in a very transit-oriented community. Now, what it does is that as we get more proposals for development in areas, in established neighborhoods, in areas where they're not suitable, we can direct them somewhere where they're suitable. The problem that we have today is that we have two major pushes, when sometimes you have the same set of people in both camps, which is bizarre, where you have one camp that says, look, we should not build condos. We should just have mid-rises. 4-6 stories is good, but no more than that. It shouldn't happen. And the other camp that says, look, we should freeze Milton's boundary, Milton's urban boundary, protect all the land, and only grow through intensification. Meaning we don't build any new subdivisions anymore, finish all of that stuff. We go to the existing neighborhoods, find a piece of land, and build a condo there. So only grow through intensification. And sometimes there are people who say both. And I can tell you right now, the numbers don't work for both. If they did, we would all be doing it. They just don't work for both. So we do have to kind of pick one or the other. And the right answer that Milton's pushing for And the region of Halton, if you follow the last month's workshop, seems to be going towards that direction as well. It's a hybrid where we do some boundary expansion, we do some single family subdivisions, but we do a lot more intensification. But we do intensification where it makes sense. We protect established neighborhoods. We protect, neighborhoods where people have been living for 20, 30 years, and we protect that character. But we also allow growth in areas where it's suitable, such as around the existing GO station as well as the new GO station. And so that's a balance that we're trying to strike. How successful we are remains to be seen, but that would be my plan. That's the life hack. That's how you kind of protect your existing neighborhoods. But you do have to accept that there is a massive demand for high density. It's going to happen and it's going to come. So now either we can be proactive about it and direct it where it makes sense, or it's going to get away from us and start popping up where it doesn't make sense, and we won't be able to stop it. Because in the province of Ontario, municipalities don't really have a whole lot of power to decide what happens where. It kind of is something that's controlled a lot more by the province than people realize. But if we have alternative, we can direct people there and kind of work around it that way. So hopefully that answers that question. Let me see if there are more comments and questions. What's happening with CN Intermodal? CN Intermodal we talked about. So the federal government, the Ministry of Transportation did give them the approval, which we were expecting anyway. So as soon as the Ministry of Environment gave them the rubber stamp, we knew it was going to pass the federal government. So it's really no news to anybody. The Ministry of Environment one was a disappointment that happened before the federal election, but this was just, one ministry said yes, so I'm going to say yes. But it's something that we're going to take CN to court for. So, let's see what courts decide. That's a good 2-3 year long process. And we're willing to go all the way. So we're putting up the good fight. The second question was about the Laurier campus. So when the current federal government came to power, they did cut the funding for the Milton Education Village, which was disappointment because it's something we've been working on for 15 years. And we're pretty excited to get started. But once the funding got cut, we worked with Laurier and Conestoga and their funders and partners and kind of put things together ourselves. So you will see the ground break now, finally. You'll see the construction will start, obviously, in absence of provincial funding, we'll start small. But we have a really nice public-private partnership going on where we'll have Conestoga College and Wilfrid Laurier in the same building. We'll have a senior home going there. We'll hopefully have Townsend Smith Foundation's hospice going there as well, all around the velodrome, and that's where education villages kind of start happening. So you'll see that starting this year. No, this year's over, 2022. Next year. I'm already in next year. And the other question was about the all-day GO. All-day GO is something that Adam and Gordon has actually done. Our MP has done a lot of really good work, and the federal government's pushing for. So now the federal government's on board. I'm convinced that it will finally happen. We do need to get the provincial government to come on board and put some money in it. But at a high level, the problem is that Milton GO line actually uses the CN train track. Because they use the CN train track, they have to share it with CN freight traffic. The right solution, and we can't have all day because CN freight is running all day. We also cannot have express train. So the right solution that City of Mississauga and Milton and some of the other municipalities, City of Toronto as well, 4 of us got together and we put together is what we call the Mystic Lane. And the idea is that instead of having freight trains running through highly populated urban areas and risking them because you can have train derailment, they carry dangerous chemicals and everything else, we kind of built a track around high density area and we swap CN's track for that track. And so the current CN track that goes through the urban area becomes Metrolink's track. And the new track is what goes to CN where freight trains then start to bypass the urban area. And that's really the right solution. The federal government is on board now. So thank you, MP Adam and Coubertin. And let's see where this goes in the future. But I think you will finally start to see some progress and some movement on this. Oh, geez, I spoke too soon. I have too many questions. Natalie, this is yours. I am done with it. So is Maliha. So I'll put outside your door. I'm going to put it here so I don't forget. You are my favorite neighbor, but it's only because you bake those awesome Christmas cookies. So let me know when they're coming. Do, 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 do. We actually cannot. It's a good question. The question comes up around other contexts as well. Can we require developers to do this, and can we require them to do Y and whatever? In the province of Ontario, municipalities cannot really require anything above the Ontario Building Code. The province of Ontario has decided to control or lack thereof, whatever, the development industry. So they decide what the building code is, and we can only enforce that. Now, we do negotiate more things. So recently, we have, with a lot of developers, negotiated larger garage sizes, because as you notice in some of the new development, garages are way too small, the driveways are way too small. And so we have, negotiated things that are above the Ontario Building Code, but we can't require them to do that. Same goes for apartment sizes. Now, I'm not in the development industry, so I don't know what the demand is for and what the public wants, but what the developers tell me, and I have no way of knowing if they're exaggerating or not, but what they tell me is that they build what the market will bear. So if they're building small units, that's because that's what the market is telling them it wants. If the market wants bigger units, they'll build bigger units. But beyond that, I don't really know. But I can tell you that we can't put any such requirement on them. That's actually a great question. The question is protect the view of escarpment from where, right? Because no matter where you have high density, someone on the other side can go and say, what about my view of the escarpment? And generally speaking, in new neighborhoods, in any new neighborhood, you don't have any view of escarpment unless the road happens to be facing that way, because your homes are so close together, and yet everything's so close together that there's really no way to work around it. What we have done at the region of Halton, as well as South Milton, as well as provincial government, credit where credit is due, is we've created a really nice heritage system that we protected from development. Region of Halton, through Sustainable Halton, has worked through amazing green belt that's protecting that green belt. NEC, Niagara Escarpment Commission, NEC protects area around escarpment. And we do look at escarpment views. Now, one argument could, and this is an argument that it's a little funny anecdote. Before I got elected, I was against any condo above 4 stories. I had lived in Redmond, Washington when I worked for Microsoft for a few years, and Redmond actually doesn't allow, at least at that time, didn't allow anything above 4 stories. So I thought that was a great idea, and that's how everything should have been done. And so when I moved to Milton, I started meeting counselors when I started learning about plans to intensify certain areas, and said, it's a terrible idea. Why don't you do what Redmond does? 4 stories anywhere. And one of the counselors, she's no longer in the council, she retired, but she said, look, and I didn't buy the argument then, I don't totally buy it now, but I can see her point now better than I could see it then. And it's as follows. She said, look, you're talking about protecting the view of escarpment for 10 people on a street where the condo will look at a condo, and the condo might drop the view, but then 600 people living in the condo might have view. So what should you prioritize for? I'm not going to go down that path. I don't 100% agree with that argument, but there is an argument. But Chandra, if you want to talk more about it, do reach out. I think it might be a better real life coffee discussion, because there might be a little bit of back and forth in there. All right, where were we? We were Will Smith. Awesome Smith. I think you do. I can probably put money that Milton is not going to have Costco. It costs a lot of money to build a Costco, especially in the house, in the way the prices are right now. And if you were Costco is not a franchise; so it's a company-owned stores. And if you're Costco, each Costco store has a massive market that it serves. And so you have one of the West End of Mississauga, you have one in Burlington, and Milton kind of overlaps between the two. They won't really build a new one in Milton unless those two are packed with such a capacity that they need it to take load off, and they're really not, because I shop at Costco as well. So I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Alrighty, so glad to tune in. Alrighty, let's move on. Her cookies, by the way, are awesome. Awesome. What's happening with the intermodal? I think you already caught the answer. If not, I'll come back to it. So dairy is, yes, the dairy was supposed to be 6 lanes all along. It was before my time. The council at that time. This was a 2 lane project. So the plan was to take Jerry to 4 lane with Britannia and then come back to Jerry, expand it, then go to Britannia. Britannia is going 6 lanes right off the bat because because of the way Milton's growing. Sorry, my throat's been really itchy, so I'm not actually drinking tea to show up. I really do need to keep the form, otherwise I start coughing. So Britannia is going to 6 lane all the way. Once Britannia goes to 6 lane, you'll notice that Louis Silleroy is also getting expanded. The expansion's pretty much complete, 2 lanes to 4 lanes. They will take a lot of load off dairy, but the plan is to expand dairy to 6 lanes. Now, whether we find alternative or follow through this plan, future councils will have to decide. But right now, that is the plan. Thanks. That's good to know. Sounds good. Alrighty. So I have a lot more questions that I think I can take. It's 8:30. I had decided to. I try to do this like 30 minutes, but the questions are coming up. Keep tapping up questions. I'll try to figure out which one to take and which one not to take. That's a good one. Parks in Ward 4. So those of you who are not in the newest part of Ward 4, I'll give you a bit of background. This goes before I represented this area, although, I don't think things would change even if I did represent it. But anyway, what happens is that when a new area gets developed, developers give up a certain part of the developable land for park space. Now they can either give us land, they can make us payment in lieu of park space, whatever. We get a certain amount of land for park space. How we distribute that, we really have two options. One option is that we can have small parks scattered everywhere so everyone can walk to a park. I like that very much. My neighborhood is designed like that. Every ward that I've ever represented is designed like that. I do represent a ward now that wasn't designed like that, but I didn't represent at the time. I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, just stating that I wasn't representing that ward. The other alternative is that you can take the park space and build massive parks. So if you look at Milton Community Park behind the sports center, there's a lot of park space there. And generally the big parks are used for bigger athletic purposes. You have baseball diamonds, cricket ground, soccer fields, and tennis courts and what have you. It's a tension where often young families prefer small parks scattered everywhere so young kids can walk to them. And as kids get older, especially if they get early teenage years, families start asking for bigger parks because now, excuse me, presumably the kids are in sports programs, athletic programs, and they can't get field time. So there's a sweet spot somewhere in the middle. We missed that sweet spot a few years ago when the Fort neighborhood got developed because we went too much on big park side and not enough on small village squares. We're kind of adjusting it the other way. Hopefully we'll find a good balance, but that's what the issue there is. Fort Neighborhood Park is coming along. There are other parks coming up, but yet that entire neighborhood has the same amount of park space as every other neighborhood. It's just configured differently. That neighborhood has, larger parks, more sports fields. And if you have young families, you don't like that, and I get it. We didn't hit the right balance. New comment. Yes, I can see your messages. That was not a question. I will move on to that. Okay. Ooh, the walking track. That's a great question about the walking track. My wife actually asked me that question today. Our facilities are open, but they still require registrations. You do have to register so staff knows how many people are coming in so it can control people. And hopefully as COVID numbers are improving, we'll get back to normal. The province of Ontario did say that they're aiming for March 22nd, I believe, or was it March 2022? Now that I think about it, it might have been March 2022. Anyway, they're aiming for March to end all COVID restrictions, including mask requirements, including vaccination requirements, including indoor social distancing. So if numbers keep improving by the end of March, the province of Ontario is planning on getting rid of all COVID restrictions and go back to the early 2019 time, the normal stuff where we can do whatever we want. But provided that a new variant doesn't come out and screw things over. So we'll see how that goes. But we at the town of Milton and the region of Halton in general, we're looking at guidance from provincial government because they're the ones setting rules and we follow them like everybody else. New comment. Okay, that seems like a troll comment. I'll ignore that. Oh, they're probably close to 20 tennis courts in Milton. I'm not sure where we're using 2 tennis courts. Milton has a lot of tennis courts. In fact, Milton, when I got to council, Milton had a plan to build a tennis court for every 10,000 people. Since then, tennis kind of went down in popularity, so we've stopped doing that, rightfully so. But Milton does have a lot of tennis courts, so please do look it up. You might be missing where they are. In fact, there are 3 right behind my house, like right behind this camera, right over there. I'm pointing at 3 tennis courts right now. Behind Sports Center, we have a bunch. On Laurie Avenue, you have tennis courts there as well, near Johnson Alley. That's a good community center has tennis courts as well. Anyway, cricket ground, yes. Cricket is an extremely high demand in Milton. And one of the things cricket players have been asking for is a hardball cricket. So we don't have any hardball pitch in Milton with proper lighting so they can play night matches as well. That is in our plan. So the next major park you'll see in Milton, next major athletic park you'll see in Milton, we will look at a proper hardball cricket ground. That is, cricket's really exploded in popularity in Milton faster than anybody else would have anticipated. So yeah, absolutely. Okay. My family's interested in outdoor skating. Oh my God, were you? So someone actually emailed me this question this morning, or was it yesterday? And it wasn't an email; it was a Facebook message. Don't send me Facebook messages. But anyway, I got this message on Facebook message on outdoor skating rinks. We should have one. It really comes down to the matter of money. Outdoor skating rinks are more expensive to maintain. And Milton Council, in general, not always, but generally speaking, Milton Council has always opted to do the cheapest thing because, Milton Council, collectively, not individually, cares exclusively about the bottom line. And so some of the nice to have things, you don't see that in Milton. On the flip side, we have lower taxes in Milton. So I guess there is a trade-off. What I would like to see, and I'm speaking here for myself, not for the entire council, but what I would like to see is we're working on a civic square right in front of the town hall in Milton. So if you remember where the old post office used to be that we took down, it's a parking lot right now, which allows people from Main Street to look at the town hall, that entire area, including the parking lot, 2 or 3 parking lots really, it's an L shape. That should all be our civic square. And so we can do that once we have a parking structure to put cars somewhere. So we're looking at that as well. We're looking at that into a civic square. And that's where I want to see outdoor skating rink. And that will bring more people to Main Street, which is always a massive challenge in Milton. Because as I mentioned earlier, Main Street, unfortunately, in Milton has been a revolving door of businesses starting up and dying because there's just not a lot of foot traffic in that area. So we do need to fix that problem. Sometimes I kind of post the question up before I read them, which is actually risky. Sometimes I just leave anyway. That's actually a really good question. It comes up a lot. Each house in Milton is required to have 2 cars, space for 2 cars, one in the garage, one on the driveway. Now, I understand that most people don't use the garages to park their cars, but each house is required to have at least 2 spots. Many people have more than 2 cars, or many people actually don't use the garage for parking, so they only have 1 practical parking spot and they have 2 cars that need space. There's been a lot of ideas thrown around, parking permits or street parking, unlimited, whatever. What we have opted to do, and has worked well, is if you live on a street where your neighbors want 15-hour street parking, which will allow you to park your car on the street effectively because you take out for work or whatever, then you can request that. And as long as 50% plus 1 people in the section of the street agree, you'll have that. And that allows us a good hybrid model where the parking limit stays 5 hours on in everywhere else in Milton. But if somebody wants it to be 15 hours on their street, they can follow a petition and they can do that process. If you go to milton.ca and search for parking, 15-hour parking, you'll see that come up. You'll also see where these parking spots are. But that is a real legitimate problem that we unfortunately don't have a solution for right now, because we're dealing with it as things are changing quite rapidly. And sorry, man, something's going on with my throat. The public is divided. There are people who don't want to see cars on the street. Every single councillor, like every time, we get a lot of messages. Anyway, people don't want to see cars on the street, and then there are people who don't have a place to park and they want to be able to park their cars on the street. So I don't know what the right solution is, to be honest. I don't think the street parking permit model will work in Milton. It works in places like City of Toronto, where the car ownership rate is much lower. But in a place like Milton, where car ownership rate is very high, it is very difficult to use public street as permanent parking for your car. Like, that's just, it's not a practical solution, because then what it leads to is that guests visiting people, they don't find parking. And that's what street parking is intended for. It's not intended for people to park their cars permanently. Excuse me. At this point in 8 halls, it's intended for guests coming in and out. It also causes a lot of issues in I don't know who's asking this question. There are not 2 locations for tennis courts. Optimus Park, I'm blanking on the park next to John, next to Johnson Alley, Nessagiva Community Center, Milton Sports Center. That's 4 right there that I know off the top of my head. And I don't play tennis, so there might be more that I don't know of. So, but that's 4 locations right there. We don't only have 2 locations for tennis courts. Moving on. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And I actually think it shouldn't happen, because if you start working it out, if residents are parking on the street, then where are your guests parking? Where are people who are visiting you parking? You don't have that parking spot anyway. The idea is, I know it's easy to say. I'm not being snappy about it, but car ownership. When a family has a certain amount of cars, home purchases should reflect the number of cars you have. I have we're a family of 8 with 5.5. Well, geez. Yeah, 5.5 drivers. My son hasn't gotten his license yet for reasons that escape me, but 5.5 drivers, and we have 2 cars, and we have no intention of adding a 3rd car. You can make do with transit. You can live with 2 cars. We have 3 daughters in university, 2 working parents, and we do it just fine with 2 cars. But I do understand that some people need more cars, and that might mean that if you have 3 or 4 cars, it might mean that perhaps you can't buy a house in a new subdivision in Milton. Older neighborhoods in Milton have very long driveways, and they tend to be less expensive anyway. But it is a problem. It's a problem that needs to be solved. But the solution is not allowing free street parking for everyone, unlimited, because it causes issues with snow clearing. It causes issue with emergency response, with ambulances or fire trucks coming in, with guests visiting people, and so on and so forth. Yes, I do know. I cannot tell you off the top of my head because I totally cannot recall right now, but I knew why it was done. Chris, you're probably leaving the comment on my Facebook page, or Milton Talk. I will find your comment and I'll give you the information. It has something to do with the weather pattern or something else. I can't remember. I will get back to you on this. All right, guys, we're hitting 8:45, so I'm going to start wrapping this up. There are some more questions, but I can always answer them later, or hold off on those questions and ask me 30 days from today. December 30th, I probably won't do it 30 days from today. Early January, ask me the question. Excuse me, this is annoying. Early January. Got it. Let's see, what else have I not answered that I can take really, really quickly. Sorry, apologize for being rude and breaking the eye contact, but I can't read the comments and look at the camera at the same time. But you know what? It's 8:45, so I am going to wrap it up. Thank you for joining in. If you have other questions, please send them over. I'll answer them in the next session, or I'll just answer them in comments. If you want me to do more of this, let me know. If you want me to not do this, let me know. If you want me to change something, let me know. I kind of enjoy this interaction because I enjoy meeting people, and COVID has really made it difficult. So this is the workaround. But thanks for joining. And if I don't see you before Christmas, and have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. Hopefully we'll see each other before then, though. And Natalie, I'll wait for your cookie. I'll drop off the boat. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Take care. Bye.